This is Kevin Pruitt with Rising Tide Startups, and my guest today is Heather Parady. Heather, thanks for joining us on Rising Tide.
Kevin, it's an honor. Thank you so much.
We were talking off camera just how many intersections our lives actually had, and it's really
Yeah.
cool to see even places we grew up and even places we've been and places we have family and just so many intersections. But
It's meant to
yeah,
be.
I'm famous for stalking people on Facebook, so I'm just self-professed right there. So tell our listeners a little bit about Heather Parady.
Sure. So I host the Unconventional Leaders podcast, and I own my own business. It's online, fully digital. So I do coaching, consulting for mission driven leaders who want to spread their messages through online media, which I think is a super powerful, powerful tool. And, a lot of people are really afraid of it, but I think this is the time for good people and leaders, people with a calling on their life, to use these tools to spread um, hope and what God has called them to do. And so it's just a joy what I do. I have a therapy background and love psychology, but this is what I felt called to do. So I've been doing it for the past 3 years. I have awesome two little kids, which you may hear in the background, so forgive me, an incredibly patient husband, and we live in Georgia.
Living in Georgia. So were you in Georgia based on your job before, or how did you end up there versus, I mean, you kind of have a Midwest background, and
Hmm. Hmm.
so you had been lived in some different places and
Yeah.
migrated from here to there. And
Yeah. Well, the short version of it is military. My husband's in the Navy, and then when he went reservist, we decided to stay because we like Georgia so much. We just decided to call it home. So
now I did actually hear that you kind of have a closet desire to live in LA. There's something about there, my people, or something like that.
you
Is
did
that?
some research, friend. Yes. Yeah, I don't think it'll ever happen though because my husband has major anxiety around all that traffic. He can't stand it. It's easy for me because I just sit in the passenger seat and text on my phone while he's driving. But
Listen to podcasts.
that's it.
Absolutely. There's so many things to take the attention when, well,
Yeah,
you can multitask for
that's
sure.
it.
So, well, I'm anxious to hear kind of the transition from, the work you were doing before and stepping into this role. I mean, was it a pretty direct line, or was it kind of a
No.
serpentine?
Yeah,
Walk us
no,
through that.
incredibly scary. And what's so interesting is out of all the interviews I've done, I'm sure you've seen this time and time again, Kevin, with what you do. This is such a common story. You get in something, and there's something kind of nudging you, where you want to explore, you want to try something, but it's so terrifying because you have time investment in one career and one path, and we're grown-ups, we have responsibility, and so trying to navigate what is the responsible right thing to do, and also to honoring what's within you. It's a really weird balance. So I'd spent about 7 years in school and got this master's degree, and one thing that I really wanted to do, got the job, got all that stuff, and just felt really empty. What I was doing was good. And I think that's what's so hard, is making, when something's wrong, you can say, oh, this is wrong, I need to move into what's right. But when something's good, and saying no to something good to say yes to something greater, I think that's what's really, really hard. It's not that I hated what I was doing. It's just there was this curiosity and a snudge. And I believe it was God calling me to do what I'm doing now. It was terrifying because one was secure, one had a steady income, a paycheck, one had an easy answer at the Christmas party to what you do. One felt secure. The other one felt terrifying. And honestly, it was very embarrassing stepping away from something that I wasn't sure of to pursue something unknown. But it's been messy and it's been bumpy. And I feel like I'm just now getting a really good grasp on where I'm at and what I'm doing. And I'm 3 years in, which 3 years in hindsight is not that long. But man, when you're walking in it, 3 years is a really long time. You're like, what am I doing? Was this the right decision to make? So yeah.
It's kind of like dog years. I mean, 3 years in podcast world is what, like 21? I mean,
Yeah,
because
something like
there's
that.
such a steep learning curve.
Something
But
like that. Yeah.
I mean, I love the whole idea of, just where you kind of thought there's this kind of internal nudge, or
Mhm.
there's something that is, even in the midst of something good, there's something that's just not quite right.
Yeah.
Like all the gears aren't meshing perfectly together. So walk us through that transition where you're sitting there at your desk, you're thinking, I just got a master's degree in this. What am I doing? Thinking even to walk away from this type thing. So walk us kind of through that
Sure.
process. Did it overlap for a while? Did you kind of moonlight
I didn't
podcasting
even
and
make it
moonlight?
to the desk. I didn't even make it to the desk.
All right.
I got the job offer. I got 2 job offers and bawled my eyes out and didn't want to take them. And my husband was just like, Heather, most people don't cry when they get job offers. They get really excited. But I knew, and this is God for you. Is the night that I wrote the email and declined it, when I hit send, I looked in my inbox and there was an email from somebody saying, "Hey, I want to hire you to help me with this." And it was within the digital space. It was just enough, money, a little, it wasn't supplementing the income I just
Hmm.
took away, but it was a sign to me. I'm like, wow, I
Sure.
didn't even look for anything, and here's somebody already in my inbox, wanting me to help them with this or that. I had started the show a few months prior, so I was wrapping up my schooling and going on the move to Georgia and starting the show. But yeah, I didn't even make it to the desk. And I'm glad I didn't, because I'm an all or nothing type of person. I think if I would have started down that path, I never would have taken the leap. It was really the perfect transition.
I mean, so that to me is just in itself is an interesting, because I mean, you knew pretty early in the process that this is not the right path to take. Did you know what the path was that you needed to take, or did you just say, "I know what I'm not supposed to do. Now I've got to go figure out what I am supposed to do"?
I felt like you, and I think you really need to pay attention to what are you naturally curious and excited about, because I think we're all uniquely made, and the uniqueness of the individual is something I could talk about all day long. I think it's fascinating. Some people just love writing. I hate writing. Like, there's, what are you drawn to? And I was so drawn to media and the power of the internet. I think it's fascinating. I can sit here and talk about online business all day long, and people, like, I'm amazed that people get bored and they don't want to talk. I'm like, what? This is the coolest thing. So what do you do in your spare time? What do you get really, really excited about? I'm convinced you can make money almost doing anything. Like, I don't know if you follow Pat Flynn. Pat Flynn is an incredible human, that if anyone is curious about how they can turn their hobby, excuse me, into something profitable, he has people who are like fly fishers, people who, study plants, and they figure out ways to make money doing it. And so it equated freedom to me. I realized that there wasn't one path, and that you could really design the life that you wanted to live. And for me, I really wanted to spread a message, and I wanted to impact a lot of people. And I knew the best way to do that was through the internet and through media. So, yeah, I would just say follow curiosity, trust the uniqueness, the thing that God put in you, the natural desires that you have, the natural talents, the natural abilities. All of those things are there for a reason. They're not there to torture you.
So what was the initial impetus? I mean, you didn't wake up one day and just thought, "I love the digital space online."
Mm-hmm.
So what was walk us back along the
Sure.
timeline backwards, even maybe even pre-master's degree. I mean, there
Sure.
was probably some interest or some involvement. Was it through social media? Was it,
Mm-hmm.
I love just
Sure.
being online and Googling things. I mean, what was the kind of
It was,
the
it was really the
drill down?
personal development, self-help journey. I got exposed to that. I started a photography business, and someone invited me to a mastermind group, and I started getting around other business owners and people who were thinking outside the box and building things. And I just became addicted quickly. I just loved the idea that somebody could take an idea and turn it into something. I thought that was fascinating. So I just started reading a ton, listening to a ton of podcasts. And the reason that I started a podcast is podcasts really changed my life. Like, my mind, like, just was blown by all the possibility out there. I was just internally changed, and I wanted to do the same thing for other people. So I would say personal development is kind of what led me, was my entry drug into it all.
I got you by 30 years, but we're just brothers from another mother, because I mean, as I'm hearing you describe your journey, I mean, there's just so much similarities,
Really? That's
even just
awesome.
I mean, just the kind of the thought process and how I even got into the space as well. So
Really? Did you like Jim Rohn, Zig Ziglar? Do you listen to all of them?
yeah, I mean, so certainly the five people you hang out with, and I tended to be hanging out with people online as much as I hung out with
Yeah,
people, in my space or in what I was doing at the time. But just the whole idea that said, um, I loved podcasting so much that I was consuming the content as fast as the really
yep,
good, the ones I wanted to listen to, that could
absolutely.
create it.
Absolutely.
So I've just, it was one of those where I'm thinking, you know what, I've listened to about 1,000 entrepreneurial on fire, episodes and Pat Flynn episodes. So actually I'm going to have to start doing this so I can actually have some more things to listen to. And I love the idea of just hearing stories like yours tonight, just
Absolutely.
the backstory. So you and I are hopping on an elevator. We're going to go up about 10 floors. You got
Let's
about
do it.
45 seconds. I am so curious to hear you really drill down and say, this is what I do.
This is what I do within the podcasting space.
No, just this is your elevator pitch to me. I'm a potential client. We're stepping on an
Oh,
elevator, and I'm going to push that button, and it's going to start going up, and I'm going to get off at my floor.
sure.
You
I
got you
help you
got 30
spread your message online. That's it.
in what respect?
Well, it depends on what you want to do because some people it's terrifying to start a podcast. So I don't think you should. Everybody, I get asked this all the time, Heather, what should I do? You should not do anything. There's no should to it. What is in your hands? What are the tools in your hands? How can we amplify that? So are you a writer? Do you want to put out written content? Do you want to start a podcast? Do you want to do a YouTube channel? Like, what is the natural thing inside of you? Let's amplify that and then think smart strategically about how we can, make that into a scalable model where you could actually start monetizing it and make a business out of it.
So, who is your ideal avatar?
Yeah, mission driven leaders. I work with people who have a mission outside of making money. I think making money is awesome, and I want to work with people who aren't afraid to talk about that. But I love working with kind of people in the helping space. So whether I attract a lot of therapists, which is really interesting to me because I've never. I don't barely talk about that. That's when it was my background, but they're naturally drawn to me. Therapists, teachers, really good people who again are in it for impact and making a difference in the world, but they're not so techy. Sometimes they really are afraid of the tech stuff and just need somebody to kind of hold their hand and walk them through just that beginning stage because it's really scary. And I want to give everyone just kind of a grace card that if it scares you, that's okay, because we weren't innately born with a microphone in our hand and a camera in our face in this thing called the internet where potentially a video could go viral and millions of people could watch it. People are like, oh, I shouldn't be so nervous. Yeah, it's a weird thing. Like, it's okay to be nervous about it. And until you build that skill set of getting comfortable and putting out content and building up that presence, it's not an innate skill that we should have.
I What a great word. I mean, because you're exactly right. I mean, how many times have we turned on the camera and we started the podcast interview and we just chatted and we're thinking, you know what am I doing here?
Yep.
I mean, the imposter syndrome kicks in. I mean, all these fears and insecurities, and you're thinking, am I going to stop talking in the middle of the interview? Am I going to ask dumb questions? I mean,
Yep.
is the person on the other end of the mic going to think, what in the world are you on about, my
It's
friend?
hard.
That
Yeah.
type of thing. But there's also a sense that when you are kind of in your area of uh, I've heard people talk about flow. I've heard people talk about a number of different things. But when you are in your space, that the way you mentioned earlier, the way God wired you, there is something just uniquely energizing
Mm,
about that too. And I
absolutely.
can tell. I mean, just watching you online, I can see there are so many times that you just kind of hit another level. It's like a runner that's hitting that 5 mile high. That
Yeah.
says, it's no longer I'm no longer in pain anymore. I'm kind of broken through that threshold, and
I
it's
appreciate
like,
that.
things
Yeah.
are really starting to click. And you can
Yeah.
tell the difference. You can tell the difference when people talk about that. So, I mean,
But it comes through action. You know what I
oh,
mean?
no
People are like,
question.
oh, they want to, I want to be at that level, but you have to be willing to be a beginner. You have to be willing to look stupid and feel stupid and and it takes a lot of humility. And that's why I go back to the mission driven piece. And it's not just some cute thing to say. It's when you are doing it because you have a clear vision of something you want, an impact you want to make. It's a lot easier to kind of hang in during that embarrassment and the hard times because, rising tide is not just for me. It's about other people. It's about impacting other people. I'm willing to put myself on the line and be uncomfortable and be scared and push the boundaries because of the vision I have and the calling that's on my life. And that's why we always have to return to that, because otherwise we'd be bailing ship. We'd be like, forget this, you know?
Exactly. You're exactly right. And I mean, it's when the tough times come, you really have to have that anchor point to go
Yeah,
back to and say, okay, what's my why? And I'm
absolutely.
really kind of curious. I mean, you kind of danced around that a lot, in the interview already, but drill down a little bit on that. I mean, so what would you say really gets you out of bed in the morning? What is the why that drives you at its very core level?
Yeah, well, the long-term vision is I want to have a full media company with a team one day and produce really impactful content that models hope to hopeless situations. So I have a huge heart. It was when I was studying psychology, it was for at-risk youth, and I worked with at-risk youth for years and years. My dad actually grew up in the foster care system and has a crazy story, and the intention is always to create stuff with them in mind. I want to show what's possible, and that what the show's title, Unconventional Leaders, is not there by accident. I really believe that and even though Seth Godin disagreed with me, I love the title. I think that those who think outside of the box, those who feel a little bit different, those who goes against the grain, those who feel like they have all odds stacked against them, I think they have a great advantage because A, they have a lot of more grit, but B, they're also able to reach people in a way that I'll never be able to reach, or you'll never be able to reach because of their own unique story. And so I feel really drawn to that people group. It's going to take a lot of money to do what I want to do long term, because I don't want to obviously monetize teenagers. So I've got to figure out, that's been my intention for the past few years, is to build up a business that I can eventually kind of walk away from and do things just from the heart without having to think about money.
Well, and I think as you scale that up, I mean, you really have to get to the point, kind of like the E-Myth book talks about, where you're
Hmm.
working on your business instead of in it. I mean,
That's the
right now
goal.
you are
Yeah,
kind of the core of,
absolutely.
of the businesses you created.
Absolutely.
And what does it look like to scale, to 10x that, or what does it look like to broaden, your scope so much that you virtually can step out of it and the machine continues to turn
Hmm.
based on the vision and the mechanism you put in place, and it really loses nothing,
Yeah.
in that,
It's
other than the
hard.
fact
It's
it's just
tricky.
bigger, it's exponential, and it's very difficult to do for
Yep.
sure.
Yep.
For sure, very difficult to do.
But
So
possible. But
yeah, no
possible.
doubt. And I
Yeah.
mean, we've got examples that we watch all the time that of how people that have done that. So
Hmm.
walk us through a little bit the kind of I mean, you started this, you say 3 years ago.
Hmm. Hmm.
So what's been kind of the circuit that the business, the cycle of the business has gone through in those
Oh,
last three
sure.
years? Has it
Sure.
been just a steady upward hockey stick to the right, up and to the right, or
No, you know, you have to figure out a skill set that you can monetize, something that it brings value to the table. And so going into something with really no skill sets, I knew psychology. If you want to talk about why you were sad, we could do that all day long, but that wasn't going to cut it with what I wanted to do. So really what I needed to do is figure out a way to be home and have freedom where I could make my own hours. And so I did freelance work for probably the first full year, where I did mostly podcast production. I did repurposing content and making just marketing pieces for small business owners. I was just a freelancer. That's what I did, which was such a great thing because I got to see the back end of a lot of different businesses and the way they were doing things and a lot of different marketing models. And so it was really, really cool. Then I moved into kind of more of a project management role my second year, where I was working with clients on a broader scale, looking at, marketing campaigns and helping plan events and launching products and stuff like that. Again, it was kind of more of a freelance type model where, I was contracting my work and stuff, but again, it was just kind of that next level of, um, getting in, learning business and figuring out the online space. And this past year, I've moved uh, into consulting, and I have a membership site and courses where I help uh, people who are starting off get their foot in the door and start building in some income stream and all of that. I've been hosting masterminds probably for the past 5 years. I was hosting masterminds before I even took the leap. Before grad school, I was hosting them in my home. So that's always been in the picture. I didn't start monetizing them until this year. They were always free.
So the idea of mastermind, are most of these, I'm assuming, are online
They
at
are
this
now.
stage?
They are now. Yeah. When I was starting off, they were in person, and then I moved online, and they were still free. And I did that for about a year, build it out to about three different teams where people were leading them without me, which was great. But as you know, with anything, it's very short lived when you're not putting a price tag on it. So free services are great, but they're also normally short lived because people don't take them very seriously. So when we started monetizing them, started getting a lot better results, and then that's another income stream.
And the idea that, I mean, you're also probably drawing a slightly different clientele, and with a price point for sure. I'm
Sure.
assuming.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So walk us through the. I'm gonna keep going back to this. Walk us through, because I mean, there's just so many questions that I can ask you. I mean, the things that you say, they're just, I can attack them from so many different angles, because it is, like I said, it just resonates so much with me, really at a very base level. But I'm just really curious, if you were going to start this again tomorrow, if you were just going to do something new tomorrow, what would that process look like? Because I think it helps so many of our listeners to really, to have people like you to walk us through this, that says, you know what, here are two or three really concrete steps that I would take tomorrow to kind of get the ball rolling and really step into this new life, so to speak.
Get myself out of the day-to-day function of the business as much as possible. So you mentioned it earlier, working on your business instead of in it. So start from the very beginning, even if you are a beginner, even if you have $0, think along the terms of a CEO of the business and looking at how can I get myself out of the grind of it as soon as possible, even if that's hiring somebody overseas for 5, 6, 7, $8 an hour. How can I build systems and processes in place that I can move myself out of it and look at the bigger picture? Because you're capping yourself with how much money you can make when you're the only person in the business. Now, it takes a lot of courage because yeah, it's money, and who has money when they're starting off? I mean, like it's really really tricky. But even if you're not able to make that leap, if you could start thinking along those terms, and a really practical thing you can do is, let's say Heather, there's zero way that I could ever pull myself out of the production piece of this or the grind of it. Go ahead and build out a duplicatable system for what you're doing, for when you are ready, it's already there. Because a lot of times people bring someone else in and it takes too much time to train that person because, well, I've just been doing it this way for so long. I don't even know what I'm doing because I'm just doing it. Well, if you can think along the terms of like, what am I doing? Can I build out something that if somebody else comes in, I can literally hand them this spreadsheet, this folder, and they can do what I've been doing. I think that that faithfulness to detail would pay off long term because you're preparing the way for somebody else to come in. You know what I mean? You're kind of setting the table and setting that energy, setting that intention. I wish I would have started stuff like that sooner, thinking along those lines sooner. I wish I would have monetized better. I wish I would have set higher price points and valued my time a little bit more and not been so afraid. That's really, really tricky and hard because you don't want to come in and be like, I'm going to charge 5 grand and you suck and you need to figure things out. Like there is a level of humility there, but also too, you can kind of get stuck in that where you think it's humility and it's really insecurity. And people, there are people who will pay you. And if you do a really good job, um, yeah, so own your worth. I mean, there's so many things I would do different and I need to work on. I mean, we could sit here all day long and talk about that. But I think those are things that come to mind off the bat.
I love this. Let me do just a really quick recap. And I just love the whole idea that, you mentioned, kind of from day one, start thinking like a CEO.
Mm-hmm.
Like you think as the owner of your company, even if you are a company of one, as Paul Jarvis loves
Absolutely.
to say. And the idea of just, outsourcing as soon as possible, you know, kind of offload the things that you can offload, even if it's, like you said, even if
Yeah.
it's, $3, $5 an hour overseas. Scale as soon as you can. Build out a duplicatable system. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
love that whole idea, even from all these from day one. Really prepare for your replacement. Prepare for somebody to take over for you,
It
from the very
that goes
beginning.
back
And
to I have to give credit where credit's due. When I was in youth group, when I was a teenager, I remember I had this drama teacher, and I remember him looking at me and he said, "Leaders work themselves out of a job.
mm,
Always
yeah,
think that way." And I took that to heart. I mean, like I still think about that in business, even though he was telling me about the drama team. But it's so true. Like if we go into it with that mindset of like I'm only here until somebody's comes in to replace me. and what in the
That
next
is
thing.
so true. And the very last point that I think you touched on there was kind of, don't be afraid to put a true value on your service.
Yeah.
Value what you provide. Let's camp out just a little bit on that, because I think that is such a crucial point
Yeah.
for us to discuss. So how do you get past that? Because that is such a sticking point for so many people.
Well, first of all, no, it's a sticky point for everybody. So the indication of fear and insecurity around that is not a hint that you are on the wrong path. It just is a hint that you're a human and that we all deal with that. Kind of a trick that I've used and I really advise people starting off is I say do a tier. So let me, for the sake of argument, let me say you're a freelance photographer. Um, there is truth that you need to gain expertise before you start charging a really good amount. But the way that you kind of can guard against that is say, okay, my first 3 shoots are going to be this really cheap price, and you hold yourself to that. The next 5 shoots are going to be this price, and you slowly put a cap on every bit that you're going to do for that price point until you work your way up to the point that you want to be. So you are learning, you are growing, but you're also forcing yourself to say, you know what? I'm sorry, I did 3 shoots at that price point. It's time for me to level up. If you're busy, if you are getting people, like you're constantly getting clients in the door, it is always time to go up. Period.
Did you hear that, listeners? I, could you say that one more time?
If you are constantly getting business in, it is time to go up on your prices.
That is what a great. I mean, if you said nothing else in this 30 minutes we've been talking, that is the gold right there. That's
Yeah.
worth every bit. I mean, you said so many other things that are just so crucial to, those that are kind of early stage in their journey and really want to learn from somebody that's ahead of them on the path. But that last thing, that is so very true. That is so very true. And I think so many of us are, we'll get to the point where, we're at capacity and we just
Mm-hmm.
kind of stagnate,
Of course.
and
Yeah.
how do you kind of cycle to that next level? And what a great. I think that's really, I love the tiered idea too. I mean, I'm kind of launching something on the side too, and I'm starting
Awesome.
like the beta is, this level, but that's only for the first, say, 3 to 5, and then the next
And let
level up
people know
for
that.
sure.
And
Yeah.
then that's going to create that kind of scarcity where people are like, oh man, this is really exclusive and I've got to get in on it. I mean, let people know. And that also too creates, you mentioned what would you do over again? Boundaries. Everybody say boundaries with me. Creating, you've got to from the beginning really set your stake in the ground that you have boundaries in your business, and people have to respect that, and they will. But otherwise, people are really going to roll over you. They're like, "Oh, what's up? Kevin, you going to give me a deal and all this stuff." And we've got to be secure and kind of hard headed about our boundaries and our. Otherwise, we're going to get burnout. Um, we're going to become angry and resent our clients and the work that we do, which would be just a really sad thing.
I love that what you just mentioned there, because I kind of had out of body experience there as you were talking about that, because I'm thinking, I've got a client that I'm working with right now that we didn't really establish the ground rules that well,
Yeah, been
and
there.
the
Yep,
things that they're asking for right now are so out of scope that
yep,
I'm like going, that's a lesson. I've got to really, learn that lesson, that next time we got to really clearly outline
I've
expectations.
been there.
Yeah, and it's part of the beta process is really
Yep,
figuring out what you can do, what are your capacity, and that's part of the boundaries you were talking
yep,
about. So,
yep.
I really love that. So, what as we wrap up tonight, I mean, what are some things that I haven't touched on that you just kind of want to leave us with, that are you think are just really would be valuable to our listeners, and just let people know where the best place to find you online?
Sure. So you can find me online everywhere at Heather Parady, heatherparady.com, Heather Parady everywhere. Um, and Unconventional Leaders is the podcast if you need some inspiration. But as far as action steps, listen, you are never, ever, ever, ever going to feel ready. It's never going to feel like the perfect time. You're never going to feel 100% confident. Um, what you just said, Kevin, was really interesting. You said that you had this boundary issue of like, okay, these clear expectations need to be drawn. So now I know next time this. That is entrepreneurship. That is leadership, is this constant pivot and constant action, learning, pivot. Action, learning, pivot. And when you can go into it with that mindset that it's not this linear path where I make a decision and everything works out, it's this crazy bumpy road, and that you have to be willing to change and pivot and grow and quote failure is just data. Hey, this didn't work out, how do I need to shift and adjust, period. And that's literally, I truly believe the only thing that separates quote successful people from people who aren't successful is they're humble enough and willing to say, yeah, I'm going to fall on my face like 15 times. And you know what? I'm going to wipe the sweat off, and I might be bloody and I might be nasty and I may be a hot mess, but by God, I'm showing up tomorrow and I'll see you in the morning. That's the only difference.
What a way to wrap up the chat tonight. I mean, so I got to buy one get one free on our little master class here at the end. So she gave us a freebie at the second one was as good as the first one. So Heather, thank you so much for just taking the time tonight and just really sharing with our audience and really sharing from your heart. I mean, just the gut level. It's here's mistakes we've made, here's things we've learned along the process, and just really how I am speaking to you like we're just having a cup of coffee, in a coffee shop. That I really want you to succeed. Just that's been your mindset and your heart set. The entire chat. So I'm really grateful for you taking the time and just really playing your part and just helping all boats rise in a rising tide. Heather, thanks again.
It's been an absolute honor. I don't take this for granted. Thank you so much for your time.